Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay at the back? I might shout. Sometimes I don't realize I've got a microphone on. And it's possibly one of the most uncomfortable microphones I think I've ever worn. No offense to the guys at the back. Welcome. My name is Paul. What do? I suppose I'd call myself a coach. I coach teams to do Scrum. I train teams into Scrum. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, a certified Scrum coach. But really, I'm a Scrum Master at heart. That's where I started. So I'm here today to talk about Scrum Masters, Scrum Mastery, and it's called Role or Job. And I dedicated my slides to the spirit of Twitter. So none of my slides will be any more than 140 characters in length. Okay, to try and cut it down to make it quite brief. So why am I talking? Why have I come today to talk about Scrum Master role or job? It's about a trend really that I'm spotting. If I'm honest, I train quite a lot of people, and in my training classes, the Scrum training classes, when we're talking about the Scrum Master role, I tend to ask people the question, a true or false question. Do you think the Scrum Master role is something which should be played in a full-time capacity? It's something that should be done by one person all the time? And I'm seeing more people now come back to me with the response saying, no, I don't think so. I think it can be played in a part-time role. It can be played by more than one person. And that worries me slightly. And today is really what I'm going to talk about, some of my fears, but also to test a hypothesis that I have, in that I fundamentally believe that it is a full-time position. I think it's something that a person who takes on that role has to invest themselves in doing that role and nothing else for the benefit of the team. So I'm not an arrogant person, so I didn't want to suggest that without some evidence to back it up. So I did some research, and I created a survey, just a short 10-question survey, very easy to create these days, online, and I passed that survey out to as many Scrum Masters as I could. So through forums, through Twitter, through Google+, through social media was the main source of the survey. And I was really only wanted responses from active Scrum Masters, people who were actually doing the role. And I got quite a few results back. I was quite pleased with the response. And all the questions, I collated all the questions, all the answers, and it's come up with some statistics. So obviously, bear in mind that I think Vic Reeves once said, 98.4% of statistics are made up on the spot. Okay, so just be wary that obviously people, you can take these statistics as truth, you can make of them what you like. But this is what my survey found. 75% of those people that I asked came back to me and they said they dedicate less than half of their time to being a Scrum Master on their team, which I thought it would be high. I didn't think the number would be that high. That's quite a high number. That's 3/4 of the people that I surveyed, active Scrum Masters, said they spend less than half their time doing it. So that was one thing. So why do I think that's a problem? And I do generally think that's a worrying problem. So not only am I going to be quoting myself in this talk, I'm going to be quoting some other people. This is Tobias Mayer. Tobias is a well-respected member of the Agile community, formerly a Scrum trainer himself. And I remembered a tweet that he made a while back. It's actually in response to a question on a forum. And Tobias said that Scrum itself doesn't really fail. The part that people perceive fails with Scrum is actually the people themselves. And I also think this is why some people are tending now to think that the Scrum Master role is purely about the process element. Scrum on its surface is a very, very simple framework. It only has a certain amount of roles, a certain amount of meetings and artifacts. So on face value, it looks very simple. So people perceive that a simple framework must be a simple role to fulfill. And what I'm saying, what I like what Tobias is saying here, is that it's not just about the process, it's about the people as well. It's about the spirit of Scrum. And only when teams understand and accomplish both, the process and the people element, do you really get the true benefits of Scrum. Okay, so that's why I think it's a good idea. Another statistic, something else I hear quite common now is that people generally are, I believed, and the survey backed it up, are taking on more than one Scrum team. Whether it's expected, whether Scrum Masters are choosing to do this, I don't know, but generally 45%, almost half of the Scrum Masters I surveyed, they said that they were Scrum Mastering 2 or more teams, some people up to 4 or more teams. Okay, and to me that just is incredible. The time it takes and the time they must spend with these teams is not enough to really get the benefit of Scrum and the benefit it can provide. So, why do I think that's the case? I'm going to quote someone else, Jeff Watts, another Scrum trainer and a Scrum coach. Jeff and I work a lot together, and we were talking about this over beer, as we do sometimes. And Jeff came up with a great quote, which I actually said I was going to quote him on. Here it is. He's saying it's easy to manage Scrum teams, multiple Scrum teams, to compliance. But it's very hard to lead one team to self-organization. And I think this is the mix-up people are making, is that Scrum is now becoming a compliance process. People are conforming to Scrum. Whereas, people can actually do that. And you can probably enforce compliance with Scrum across a number of Scrum teams. But to actually get one team to self-organize and to lead that team is a much harder job, and it requires effort. It requires thinking and requires power to do that. So I was trying to think in my mind how I can sort of put this across, why I think the role of the Scrum Master is so important, and why I think it's a full-time role. And the best analogy I could come up with was going back to my school days. And one of the first things I remember from a chemistry lesson, I must have only been sort of 12 or 13, but I can remember it quite clearly, was the teacher explaining the differences between a chemical reaction and a physical reaction. Okay, so a chemical reaction would be something which actually the elements in that reaction change fundamentally to create something else. Okay, and I believe this is what self-organization actually is. And the Scrum Master is there as a catalyst. It's quite commonly described as a catalyst in a Scrum team, as a catalyst for a chemical reaction to take place. And the chemical reaction is self-organization. Now, catalysts can't usually work on their own. They need the environment around them to make that reaction happen. And they need to see a difference. There is a different state at the end of that reaction process. And I think what we're seeing more of, what I see more of in Scrum Masters and Scrum teams that I coach and that I train, is that it's more of a physical reaction. And in chemistry, a physical reaction is very similar to putting water in a freezer and it turns to ice. That's a physical reaction. Okay? When you take the ice out of the freezer, it returns to water. And that's what I see a lot of teams going through now, is that Scrum, whilst it's been adopted, if the Scrum Master becomes removed, the team will revert back to their previous state. Okay, so I think it really does require a lot of effort to get that chemical reaction in place. So I tried to think to myself, what is it that people are getting wrong? Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe people are wrong as well. Okay? Why are they getting it wrong? And I thought maybe it's about language. Maybe it's about the words that are being used, the terminology. So I checked. I obviously use the internet, as I tend to do mostly now. And this quote comes from businessdictionary.com. I didn't know anything about it before I checked, but it sounds important. So it looks like it might be true. And this is their definition of a role, okay, which I'll just read out. It's a prescribed or expected behavior associated with a particular position or status in a group or organization. Now, Scrum talks about 3 roles, one of which is the Scrum Master role. So, but that definition, and that may be similar to the understanding that you guys have of a role, almost implies that it can be shared. It's the responsibility of a group rather than one individual person. So I think that is slightly confusing. And whilst this is true in a business context, I checked another definition. This is just taken from google.co.uk, just typing in the word role and definition. And this is what it comes back with. Now, this is different even again. And this is just saying a function assumed by or part played by a person or thing in a particular situation. And what I don't like about that is it's saying about a part being played. And a lot of people now, I hear quite commonly in Scrum teams saying, oh, I'll play the Scrum Master today. I'll play the role, which I think is fundamentally wrong. Okay, I think you've very much got to be a Scrum Master. I don't think it's something you can play. And I hear people saying, I'll wear the Scrum Master hat, knowing that it's something I can take off when I have to do other things. So no one is actually dedicating themselves to that position. And you can see the similarities between, when you watch films, they're actors playing roles. They're not the real people, they're actors. Some people are very good actors. And some people can act the Scrum role very well. But it's different from actually being that role, being the person. So, I've got a little test for you now. I've called this the Scrum Master Awards for Great Achievements, and I've shortened that to SAGA. I've got a test for you, basically. Have we got any Scrum Masters in the room? Can I ask you to stand up? Nobody wants to. Trust me, it's not painful. I won't be cruel. It's basically a little test that I've got here. Can you sit down? You may sit down. No, I didn't. No, there's a but. You stand up again. Stand up again. You may sit down if you've been a Scrum Master for less than 1 month. Sit down if you've been a Scrum Master for less than 1 month. Okay. Sit down if you've been a Scrum Master for less than 3 months. Okay. Less than 6 months. Oh, we're getting down to 4 left. Less than 12 months. Oh, okay. Less than 18 months. All right, we've got 2 left. We're going to check these. Who's the longest serving? How long have you been a Scrum Master? 2 years. 2 years and about, it's close. It's close. So we'll round of applause for these 2 guys. You can sit down now. Thank you. 2-year-old Scrum Masters. Well done. So the reason why I want to see if the definition I'm going to show you now relates more to what you believe you've been doing for the last 2 years. So I checked the definition of a job. And this, I felt, made me feel much happier when I read this. It's performed by an employee in exchange for pay, consisting of duties, responsibilities, and tasks. And there's a bit more. I'm going to read you a bit more, because it actually goes on to a further definition on the same website. It said, those tasks are defined and specific. They can be accomplished, quantified, measured, and rated. From a wider perspective, a job is synonymous with a role and includes the physical and social aspects of a work environment. Often, individuals identify themselves with their job or role, i.e. foreman, supervisor, engineer, and derive motivation from its uniqueness or usefulness. Does that feel more like what you guys do, you 2 guys, as a Scrum Master? Does it feel like a job to you for 2 years? Yeah? And that's what I believe when I was a Scrum Master. It was what I did. It wasn't a role I played. When people asked me what I did, I said, I'm a Scrum Master. It's something I think people have to believe and have to be proud of. So I think language does play a part. And I think sometimes we've got the language wrong. I even checked with Ken. Because, I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to think I was wrong. So I went back to Ken's original book, 2001. The first black book. I got it home and checked page 31, just to prove, you can prove that I checked it. The first line of Ken's definition of a Scrum, he says, is the person who manages the Scrum process in an organization. And what I like about that is he says it's a person. Okay, it's not a group of people. It's not a responsibility that's shared. It's a person. And he even refers to that. He says things in his book like, he or she tries to gauge the velocity of the team. He or she is focused and determined to do whatever is needed for their Scrum teams. So he's talking about people, individuals, okay, doing this role. And that's very similar to how I interpreted the role of a Scrum Master to be. So I think language did play a part and does play a part in this whole example. Another reason that I think people might reflect on this and say, we don't need a Scrum Master, or we can't afford a Scrum Master. And sometimes I do hear this quite a lot, is people think we're too small. We're only 2 or 3 people, you know, we're only an organization of 8 people. We can't afford a full-time Scrum Master. And whilst I do believe that small companies and small teams are naturally more agile in their nature. Self-organization will occur more naturally, more quickly. I still think even small teams can benefit from having a full-time Scrum Master influence in that team. And I've seen some small organizations just invest in even an external Scrum Master to come in and help them for 2 or 3 sprints. And they've had the improvements that they've seen have been radical compared to the things that they would have taken them years to actually adopt. So I think whilst small teams does play a part, I don't think it's an excuse not to. I also thought maybe it's to do with people's understanding of the term. Interestingly, all the Scrum Masters that I surveyed were, I think, about 98% of them, all but the 100 I surveyed, were certified Scrum Masters. So they've all technically been through a training course to tell them what a Scrum Master is. And I found it quite interesting. I asked people to define what a Scrum Master was in a simple sentence of 100 characters or less. And I got some really interesting answers. I'm going to share some of those with you now. Some answers were good. I divided them into 3 categories. There's the good, there's the bad, and there was the ugly. Okay? So I'll give you some examples of each. The good ones first. These are the ones that I liked, my favorites. This person said, I help the team to become as good as they can be, individually as well as the team. Same for the organization. I like that. That's a good summary of what a Scrum Master is. You know, they help people get better, but not also for the benefit of themselves, but for their team and also beyond that into the organization as well. Excuse me, just going to take a drink. You don't have to clap, by the way. So I like that one. And here's another one that I liked. Being a sheepherder. Quite commonly, Scrum Masters are referred to as sheepdogs. I don't like referring to people as animals. So I prefer the sheepherder idea. Keeping the team on point and shielding them from the wolves. I like that. Okay, I like that. That's good. And my favorite, I had about, like I said, about 100 responses for this. My favorite from the survey was this one. A whitewater river guide. The invisible gorilla watcher. Uber facilitator, chaos controller, team whisperer, and team system mirror. Now, the guys that some of you I recognize from a course I was running earlier this week here in Vilnius, and talking about the Scrum Master role. And I referred to it quite a lot as a mirror. First and foremost, the Scrum Master is there as a mirror to the team to play things back, to show the team how they look and how things are going. But I also like the fact that the Whitewater River Guide, someone at the back of the boat, who can see a little bit further ahead maybe, knows where the dangerous parts are, where the dangerous parts can be. But the boat doesn't move forward without all the team having their oars in the water. Okay? A Whitewater River Guide can't move a boat forward on their own. In fact, they don't even push the boat forward. Okay. So I like that definition. So there's some of my favorite 3 ones. I had some least favorite. For every good one that I had a bad one. And here are some of the bad ones. And this is also part of the way I like to clarify what I understand as a Scrum Master. This is what a Scrum Master is not. Making sure that all the Scrum meetings happen. Making sure the issue tracking software is up to date. I dislike that one. Yeah, you're not. And again, a common misunderstanding of the Scrum Master role is that they're the meeting organizer. Whilst you facilitate, you've got to encourage the team to attend these meetings themselves. And you're not there to keep the tracking software up to date. That's not your job. You're not the Scrum secretary. You're not the Scrum bitch, dare I say it. You're not the Scrum monkey, okay? You're there to help the team. Another one I disliked, helping the team on planning, maintain work breakdown structure and artifacts. I don't like that either. The only memory I have from work breakdown structures is from a kind of 15-year-old project that I worked on back in BT a long time ago, and it was horrific. It's not really about maintaining a work breakdown structure. You've got to encourage teams to be able to think about the work breakdown themselves in a much more organic way. And my least favorite of the three was this one: monitoring daily situation on weekly meetings, checking hours, buffers, and people's availabilities. I don't want to check people's buffers, let alone their availabilities. So, it's just really a bad understanding from my point of view. But this is genuine. People answered this survey genuinely believing this is what their primary role, if they were defining their role in 100 characters, this is what they said. So they're the bad ones. I also have some funny ones, some ugly ones. Someone who's just too lazy. Someone said, standard Scrum Master role, see any Scrum guide. It kind of missed the point of what I was asking the question for, which kind of made me laugh. And my favorite one was this one: helping team members from management bullshit. It's very true, but largely quite funny. So, I think there is generally a real mix. People that I can obviously see do understand the role very well, but for every person that does understand it very well, there is also someone who doesn't. Quite clearly doesn't. So I think language and understanding of the role does play a difference. So not only do I think people don't understand the role, I think organizations struggle with the understanding of the role too. Now, I've only really noticed that I work in the UK, as you can probably guess from my very British accent. And I've only really seen this role arise in the UK as such. And in the last 2-3 years, it's been the rise of the Agile project management role, the Agile project manager role, I should say. And I did a quick search on this. If I was applying for a job in the UK, if I was unemployed, and I went onto JobServe, which is quite a popular IT professional job search forum, a job search website, I actually found, I'll give you some stats on this, I actually found, if I was to put in the word Scrum Master, I only found 754 jobs in the UK. However, if I entered Agile Project Manager, I could have chosen from 8,370 jobs. Okay. Now that tells me something. That tells me that this kind of Agile Project Manager role is a lot more common in organizations. And I generally think that this is the reason that this has come about, especially in the last 12 months, is because organizations don't really understand what a Scrum Master is. Some people think that a Scrum Master is the same thing. And I get emails from HR companies and recruitment companies asking me to be a Scrum Master in a company when really what they want is an Agile project manager. And to give you an example of that, I went down and dived down to one of these jobs online. And one of the descriptions of what they thought was a Scrum Master was these things. You will be, as a Scrum Master, you will be responsible for managing small to medium-sized software development projects and development teams. You will be conversant with all technologies, but you will not be expected to code. And you must be a very agile project manager. That's what their understanding of a Scrum Master is. And I think that's kind of drifted into HR organizations. Interestingly, I've only ever trained about, in Scrum, certified Scrum trained, about 850 people, close to 900 people. In all those people, I've only ever counted 2 people who've ever come from the HR part of the organization. 2 people I've ever trained from HR. And I was really pleased that those 2 people did, but I wish I could see another 200. Okay, because I don't think human resources departments, recruitment consultants understand if they're recruiting Scrum Masters, or they just want to replace project managers with Agile project managers and just give them a different name. So I don't think that helps, and I think that confuses people even more. Whoops. Another statistic. I told you there'll be lots of stats in this talk. You can ignore them. They might not be true. 88% of Scrum Masters take on additional responsibilities. So that might be by choice. Can anyone just shout out, what other responsibilities do you think these 88% of people took on in a Scrum team? Developers, very commonly, yeah, that was in the top 3. Any others? Not so much testers. Not so much architects. Product owner, no? Analytics. No. Technical lead was another one. You know, technical leadership, team lead, very popular. And project manager. People, you know, say, I do the project manager stuff as well as the Scrum Master stuff. So it may be that people are expected to take these roles on in addition. I spoke to at least 2 or 3 guys in the Scrum training course this week who were expected not just to do a Scrum Master role, but to do development or to do testing. And I think it creates a kind of a hero culture. You know, you expect the rock stars in your team. They're so great that they should be able to do this stuff as well. You know, they can take on a Scrum Master role. It's easy. And I think largely, I'm going to make a fairly controversial statement now. I think the average Scrum Master thinks that they're above average as a Scrum Master. I think that people think they're better at it than they actually are. I talk to a lot of Scrum Masters, and you know, a lot of these Scrum Masters are doing dual roles. They're either project managers as well, or they're doing some, you know, they're code gurus who are just doing 100 lines of code a day, and they're doing a Scrum Master role. And I think, well, are you really doing that right? Have the Scrum Masters that I teach and the Scrum Masters that I coach become complacent, think that they're better than they actually are? And that is a worrying trend as well. Has anyone heard of Sheepherder? Sheepherder, only a couple of people. A different question. Have any of you seen a film called The Karate Kid? More people, right? More people. The 1980s, massive film. In The Karate Kid, it's easier for me to explain through 80s film, trust me. In The Karate Kid, Daniel's son, who's the kind of protege, goes to Mr. Miyagi, who's a teacher, and he asks him to teach him karate. Basic principle of the story. And Mr. Miyagi says, he doesn't really tell him how, he just says, look, you've got to do this. And he gets him to paint the fence. There's one thing he does, he says, paint the fence. Mr. Miyagi's got a huge fence, probably as big as this wall. And he says, Daniel, I don't want you to ask me why, just paint the fence. And Daniel's son's like, no, I don't want to paint your fence. I've been, you know, and so eventually he caves in and he starts painting. And Mr. Miyagi gets Daniel to paint the fence for about 8 hours, a whole day of painting the fence continually. And the next day he comes in and says, well, we're not painting anymore, thank goodness for that. And then he says, I want you to wax my car. And he shows him how to do it. He says, you've got to wax on with this hand and wax off with this hand. Wax on, wax off. And he just gets him to do it all day. Daniel hates it. And in the end, Daniel, Daniel's son's really not very happy with it, and he fights back. And he doesn't realize why. And that's very much the shoe stage of the Sheepherder. You have to understand you have to do things by the book. The ha stage is very much that you understand why you're doing it. And in The Karate Kid, all of a sudden when Daniel starts to do karate, the moves that he's been doing, the painting the fence, actually becomes a very natural motion. And he can actually fight using karate, using these really natural motions that he's been doing for the last week, 2 weeks. And it becomes natural. That's the ha stage. It's where it's become second nature. And the re stage is where you understand the martial art, the karate so well that you just break the rules. You can break the rules. You can come up with your own ideas and your own style. Okay? And the Scrum teams and Scrum Masters should go through the same thing. Now, very much when you start doing Scrum, you have to be in that shoe stage. You don't have to question. The team will fight you as a Scrum Master. They will say, we don't want to do this. We don't want to do daily Scrums. We don't want to do retrospectives. They're a waste of time. But you have to, your role as a Scrum Master is to say, look, you may not believe me, but trust me, you have to do this. Don't question why, just do it. Okay? And then when the team starts to understand it, it becomes second nature, and they do it without asking, then they can start to explore different ways. And they've become agile. They can understand how they can expand themselves in different ways. And my concern is that people often assume that the team is more agile than it actually is. People assume they've got to the restage when they're still in shoe, or they haven't quite got to heart yet. So I think it's important. A good Scrum Master is a humble Scrum Master, someone who always knows that I'm not as good as I can be, and the team isn't as good as it could be. You really have got to establish where you are and where you've got to go next. A very important stage. Mike James, another Scrum trainer. Anyone read the Scrum Master checklist? If you haven't, and you are a Scrum Master, you should read this. Okay. If you're going to be a Scrum Master, you should read this. And I always point people to this in courses when they say, I've run out of stuff to do. As a Scrum Master, I'm bored. I'm twiddling my thumbs. The team just does it now. You'll probably think you're in the restage when you haven't even got through shoe yet. Okay, there's a lot more to being a Scrum Master than you actually think and you actually might have read. So go and read Mike's checklist. And he came up with a number of points. And I stole a lot of Mike's work for my survey. A lot of the questions that I put in my survey were from Mike James's checklist, to see how many of those things Scrum Masters were actually doing. So go and read that as a good source. So in conclusion, really, I'm trying to wrap up. So what do I think the consequences are? Well, I think self-organization will probably happen by itself naturally. I think it will take a lot longer than people think it will. And Scrum Masters are a great way to catalyze, to start that, put some effort into becoming self-organizing faster and getting some benefit faster. I don't think a lot of teams can afford to wait as long as it will take to become self-organizing naturally. I think the Scrum Master will actually inject some pace, inject some energy into the chemical reaction that has to take place. Some teams may never get there without a Scrum Master in place or a part-time Scrum Master in place. And my second kind of summary really is if you go into Scrum knowing you have compromised your role as a Scrum Master straight away, you're much more likely to compromise Scrum itself in the future. Everything else won't seem as dangerous, won't seem as risky. We don't have to really have a product owner, really. We don't have a full-time Scrum Master. We certainly don't need a full-time product owner. And you end up layering compromise on top of compromise. So what am I going to do with this next? What's my job in this? I kind of feel a responsibility to share what I've got, to test my hypothesis further. You may all disbelieve me, which is fine. But I'm going to go next week. Is the Scrum Gathering in London? Anyone going to Scrum Gathering London next week? I know Jürgen is. Just me and you. I'll be doing the same type of thing. I'm doing it in much more of a workshop format. If you've got time, next week, I know it's short notice, but read up. Come across to the UK. It's going to be good fun in London. I've also, I try to blog on this as well. I try to come up with a concept, an idea, which again I'm going to test next week in London, of the concept of a Scrum Master Manifesto. Most people have heard of the Agile Manifesto, and it's kind of a tribute to 10 years of the Agile Manifesto. I wanted to give Scrum Masters something, to keep a bit of a check, a status check on your own Scrum Master skills. So I kind of summarized it in a Scrum Master Manifesto, which I won't go through now, but it's there if you want to go and look at it. And I'm going to revise it next week and update it next week at the Scrum Gathering. And the last one really is, I think there is a gap. I think people walk out of a certified Scrum Master course or any Scrum overview course with an impression of a Scrum Master role, and they may well take it on not knowing really how much time it should require and how much time it does require to do it well. And I've started teaching an advanced Scrum Master course, which is very much to take, we don't talk about Scrum. We talk about how to be a good Scrum Master, how to be a great Scrum Master, how to actually create a feedback culture in your team, create self-organizing teams, and take your teams beyond where they are now. Take your own skills to the next level.